Discovered my mother knew about my stepfather's absence and did nothing. Now she's trying to make me the villain in his death. The abuser in my life was my stepfather, who I'll just call Jay. My biological dad passed away when I was just a baby, and when I was 7, my mom met Jay. They got married when I was 9. Looking back now, I can see the abuse began almost immediately, though at first it was wrapped in subtleties and acted more like grooming than anything outwardly sinister. For example, Jay would watch me while my mom worked late shifts and would let me stay up far past when I was supposed to. He'd put on movies and shows that I wasn't supposed to see, but only if I promised never to tell her. He'd whisk me away on fishing trips and, just between us, buy me sweets and fast food that were otherwise off limits, always our little secret. It's obvious to me now that all these secrets were his way of testing how well he could get me to keep things from the other adults in my life. When he realized I wouldn't tell on him, his grooming escalated and became much more overtly romantic. He crossed a terrible line and turned things physical a little before my 12th birthday. At that time, my feelings were beyond confusing. I understood the concept of bad people who did bad things to children, the kind you're warned about when told not to use your real name online or talk to strangers. But Jay had spent so much effort convincing me what we had was special, even that we were in love, and since there was no outright violence, he went out of his way to point out he was never hurting me. I figured, in my childish mind, that he couldn't possibly be one of the bad people. I thought this must be something different. The abuse carried on all through my teens and even into my early adulthood. Jay was frighteningly good at hiding all of it. I honestly believe, with a few recent exceptions, nobody knew except for him and me. At times, family members lived with us or stayed for long periods, and somehow he always kept them oblivious. I kept my silence for so many reasons. At first, Jay convinced me that no one would understand because we were in love, and if anyone found out, we'd both be in trouble, the familiar lie these monsters use. Even as I grew and realized I wouldn't actually get dragged into trouble, I held back for his sake because I still believed I loved him and didn't want him getting hurt. I only ever threatened to tell once, when I was 16, which, where I live, is the age of consent. I'd grown tired of all the sneaking around and told him he had a choice: divorce my mom and be with me, or I'd tell her we'd been having an affair this whole time. The panic in him was obvious. He used my mom's fragile mental health against me, reminding me what she'd gone through when my dad died, the depression, the suicidal thoughts. He told me that if she broke again because of this, it would be my fault. Either way, he made it clear the blame would rest with me. After that, I tried to break up with him, telling him he'd picked my mom over me and that was it, we were finished. Of course, this wasn't a real relationship, and he didn't accept it. Things changed. He started to get violent, abusing me physically, and for the first time, threatened the people I loved. The worst part, around this time, my mom and Jay had gotten custody of my cousin, who's 3 years younger than me. Jay made it painfully clear that if I didn't do what he wanted, he'd go after her instead. That right there is a huge part of why it all lasted so long. I was terrified that if I moved out before she did, he'd hurt her because of me, so I didn't actually leave until I was 22, literally a week after she left for university. Best believe I was out of that house as fast as I could be. A few months after moving out, I tried to tell a family member everything, but they didn't believe me. Around that time, my mental health was in shambles. I was drinking too much and getting mixed up in petty crime. I wasn't the best person to believe. I'd lash out, had bad temper issues, and generally wasn't handling anything well. They basically told me everyone else would think I was lying too, so for years after that, I kept quiet. I tried at first to keep in touch, stick around the area so I'd be near family, but Jay never changed. Every family gathering felt like walking into a burning building. Eventually, I just moved far away and slowly dropped contact with almost everyone. Then, in March this year, Jay died. I can't express how massive a relief that was. It felt like someone had finally taken this crushing, suffocating weight I'd carried for so long off my shoulders. I know it sounds cheesy, but for the first time in my life, at 30 years old, I felt free. I could finally start focusing on healing and working on repairing my mental health, knowing there was no chance he could ever come back and ruin it. That feeling alone was incredible. Even more, I could start reaching out to family and try to rebuild relationships. Explaining everything that happened, and why I disappeared, felt easier now that Jay was gone. Responses varied. Some believed me and apologized for not noticing or helping sooner. Others accused me of making things up about someone who couldn't defend himself. It's not always been easy, but I've been able to recover some relationships in the process. My mom was always going to be the hardest part. She struggled a lot with mental health all her life, and that absolutely affected us growing up. Add to that my resentment. I felt like she and I were sharing Jay, a feeling I loathed. 2 weeks ago, I finally gathered the courage to sit down with her and lay everything out, just as I have here. I braced myself, half expecting her to either call me a liar or, worse, defend Jay, because she loved him so much, sometimes even to her own detriment. Instead, she stunned me. She told me she'd known, she'd suspected for a while and finally got proof when I was 12, when she found some secret messages between Jay and me that he hadn't deleted. She said she hadn't done anything because, from the messages, she could tell I was a willing participant. She wasn't going to let him go down for something she saw as being my fault. She even said that if I hadn't wanted it, I would have. She told me, through tight lips and an impatient sigh, that I should have told her the very first time he touched me or did anything I was uncomfortable with. As if it was so simple. Then she went on to say it would be humiliating for her if it got out that she'd married a man who'd rather have her own son. The words hung between us, sharp and devastating, and I could hardly breathe. She conceded, almost as an afterthought, that she feels a bit guilty for not stepping in when she realized he'd started hitting me. Apparently, she probably would have intervened if she knew he was also threatening my cousin. But when it came to the rest, there was nothing. She saw no reason to feel guilty for letting me deal with the consequences of throwing myself at an older, married man. That was how she framed everything. That was all I got. I left that conversation in absolute shock, feeling like whatever ground I'd managed to reclaim beneath my feet had just vanished. I haven't spoken to my mother at all since then. It's like the whole fragile scaffolding I'd built around myself for healing just crumbled away, and since then, I've felt like I'm spiraling all over again. I haven't relapsed and reached for a drink, not yet, but I can feel the urge looming, closer with every sleepless night. I'd planned, for the first time in years, to go home for Christmas, to let my family see me as someone putting the pieces together. Now, though, I can't face it. I know she'll be there, and her presence alone is enough to drag me back emotionally to when everything was happening. It's relentless, my mind keeps looping over what could have been. What if I had told her everything when I was 16? Would it have changed anything? She says she felt guilty not intervening after the violence started. Would she have helped me if I'd told her from that angle back then? If I'd gone to the police, like I sometimes thought about, would she have ever owned up to what she knew? Or would she have accused me of lying, stayed by his side, and just let everything continue anyway? Did I ever really have a way out, or has this always just been the shape of my life, inevitable, inescapable, and entirely up to me to survive? I didn't go home for Christmas. I'd told myself I wouldn't, but I still left the suitcase by the door like some part of me wanted to dare myself. Instead, Christmas morning, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. A calm man with a practiced voice introduced himself as the solicitor handling Jay's estate. He apologized for the timing. Apparently there was a small personal bequest for me and an item I had to collect in person. It threw me. I expected to be erased from his paperwork, not threaded through it. I went the next day because I couldn't stand wondering. The office was quiet, the kind of too warm you get from radiators that have been on since dawn. He handed me a white envelope with my name on it in Jay's handwriting that made my stomach turn. There was also a key taped to a card, deposit box details. I opened the envelope in the stairwell because I couldn't bring myself to sit down. Inside was a single page and a check. I read one line, "No one will ever love you like I did," and whatever strength I'd scraped together just sluiced out of me. I put everything back and walked out into the cold like I was trying to step out of my body. I phoned my cousin. I didn't plan it, my fingers did it without asking me. We met at a chain coffee place near the station because it felt neutral. I told her everything. I mean everything. I said his name out loud in the ways I'd avoided for years. I told her about Mum. She went white, then red, and then she said something I've not been able to stop hearing since. She warned me. Warned her. Not me. My cousin said Mom had pulled her aside when she first came to live with us and told her a set of rules that sounded rehearsed. Don't sit on his lap. Don't accept lifts if you can help it. Lock the bathroom door. If he ever tries to come into your room, shout. If he ever gets funny with you, call me. And then, my cousin said, almost apologetically, like the guilt of it belonged to her, she told me not to tell you any of that because you take things the wrong way. I felt something inside me go very, very quiet. I think that was the exact moment a lot of my confused loyalty finally died. It wasn't ignorance. It wasn't even denial. She set guardrails around other people and left me to the motorway. After the holidays I went to the bank with the key because I couldn't let that sit inside my head without knowing. The box was anticlimactic in that way that hits harder than anything dramatic. No photos like in films, no USB full of confessions. Instead, a cheap coin machine ring I remembered him making me wear when I was 12 because it was funny we were married. A folded paper with my handwriting on it, one of those stupid notes you pass at school, "Can I sleep at A's house this weekend?" He'd kept it. A train ticket with my initials penciled on the back. And a scrap of wrapping paper with a smear of cake icing that somehow, impossibly, I recognized from a birthday where he took me fishing instead of letting me have friends over. He'd turned our history into trinkets and locked it up like treasure. I didn't take any of it home. I walked it straight round to the police station because I needed someone in a uniform to look me in the eye and tell me I wasn't crazy. I expected to be told they couldn't do anything, and, yes, the man on the desk did say that Jay being dead meant there'd be no charges, but then he asked if I would like to give a statement anyway. He said it mattered to record it. He said sometimes other people come forward later and having a clear record helps. He said it like he'd said it to others before. So I sat in a room that smelled like coffee and carpet shampoo and spoke for hours. I'd never said it all in one go to anyone. My throat hurt but I kept going until I was empty. They took the letter and the ring and the bit of wrapping paper and logged them, which made me feel sick and vindicated at the same time. The detective, she was soft-spoken and didn't flinch, asked if I'd ever had social services involvement as a kid. I said no, not that I knew of. She suggested I do a subject access request with the council for my childhood records. It can help, she said. Even if it's just seeing how adults spoke about you. It took 2 weeks and a form and a photocopy of my ID. When the brown envelope came, I held it for a full day before I opened it. Inside, photocopies of notes in neat, detached handwriting. Apparently, when I was 12, a teacher raised a concern about boundaries with stepfather after catching him waiting for me outside the changing rooms during PE and insisting on walking me to class. There was a home visit. Mom told them she had no concerns and that I was an affectionate child who doesn't understand appropriate physical space. The case was closed. At 15, there was an anonymous referral, neighbor, maybe? About regular late-night male visitor to boys' room. Another home visit. Mom said I was sexually precocious and that she'd spoken to me about not confusing kindness with romance. Jay was described as cooperative and concerned. I didn't say anything because at that point I thought I was protecting him and I thought Mom would break if I told the truth. They closed it again. Reading those lines, hearing the tone of her through other people's pens, made me shake the way you shake after you've already been cold for hours and someone turns the heating on. It hurts different. The solicitor emailed to ask if I would agree to a deed of variation so that the bequest, that check with his handwriting attached to it, could be folded back into the estate. Given sensitivities. I said no. I said, very politely, that I wasn't in the business of making my abuser's money easier to look at. I haven't touched it. It sits in a separate account with a name that's just numbers because I can't bear to label it. Mom rang me 5 minutes after I sent that email. I didn't answer. She sent a message that read, "You're embarrassing us," and then, "You always wanted to ruin everything." It felt like being 12 again, only this time my silence was on purpose. The family split along lines I had expected and also didn't. One of the same people who told me months ago that I was making things up about someone who couldn't defend himself phoned me late at night and cried. She'd gone round to Mom's and asked point blank if Mom really knew. Mom said, "I didn't know like that," and then, in the same breath, "What was I supposed to do? Lose my husband because my son can't keep his hands to himself?" She told me that bit like she was repeating a confession she hadn't wanted to hear. She said she believed me now. I didn't know what to do with that either. Somewhere in the mess of all that, a woman I'd never met called me. She introduced herself as a former youth club coordinator from years ago. She said the police had been in touch, and that she remembered Jay because he'd been told not to volunteer after boundary concerns. She didn't have details. She just wanted me to know that the way he was with me wasn't unique to me. I hadn't really allowed myself to think about that, other victims, but it sits in the corner of my room now like a shadow that has a voice. I did see my cousin for New Year's. We made a roast in her tiny kitchen and burnt the parsnips and ate them anyway. At midnight, she took my phone, turned it off, and put it in the fridge with the Prosecco. We laughed because it was ridiculous and because the other option was screaming. We stood on her little balcony with the fireworks flickering over the car park and she said, "You know you don't have to go back to her ever again, right?" And I realized I'd been waiting for someone related to me to say those exact words out loud. There isn't a neat moral in any of this yet. Nothing is easy. I still wake up with the taste of that letter in my mouth sometimes, and I keep a copy of the council notes in a drawer I can reach from bed like proof that I didn't dream at all. But something has shifted. It's not just freedom like when he died. It's the knowing that the story doesn't vanish if I don't tell it. It exists, in black ink, in other people's files and other people's memories. It means when I say Mom knew, I'm not just slinging a hurt feeling. There are dates and visits and decisions she made that have their own weight. I haven't forgiven her. I don't know if I will. Right now, what I feel is a kind of cold, clean resolve I've never had before. I'm not going to court. There's no trial to win. But I am going to keep putting records in places where other people can't pretend they didn't see them. I am going to stop trying to solve my mother like a puzzle I owe answers to. And, quietly, without making a production of it, I'm building something that feels a lot like a life that wasn't designed with her in mind. For the first time, home is starting somewhere completely separate from her. It's small and a bit burnt round the edges and sometimes it sits in a fridge beside a bottle of Prosecco, but it's mine. I didn't think there was going to be more to find, not in any way that wasn't just me looking at the same pain from new angles. Then the school sent their response to my request. A thin, apologetic cover letter and, behind it, photocopies with my name in the margins like a watermark. Year 8, P.E. Staff report stepfather waiting outside girls' changing area, escorted pupil back to tutor room. DSL informed. My tutor's neat looped handwriting under a line that made my chest feel hollow. X is a tactile child, has difficulty with personal space, stepfather appears attentive. The DSL had emailed the council that day. Someone wrote back, no further action if no disclosure. There was a note from a parents' evening I'd forgotten entirely. Mom reports puberty hit hard, requests advice for managing inappropriate crushes. I remember the shirt I wore that night. I remember Jay's hand on the small of my back while he told me my tie was crooked. I remember nothing of my teacher's face. I thought I'd achieved the maximum number of times a floor can drop out from under you in a single story. Then a woman messaged me on Facebook. Her profile picture was a spaniel. She said she used to babysit for us when she was 16. Now she's 32 with 2 kids and a degree certificate on the wall she made sure to take a photo of because she needed me to know she'd made a life. She said Jay got funny with her on the drive home, parked the car outside her house with the engine off and his hand on the gear stick, talking about how mature she was and how lonely marriage could be. She said she told my mum because she didn't know what else to do. My mum told her not to make a drama where there wasn't one and that she needed the help, and if she was going to get hysterical then maybe she wasn't the right fit. She never came back. The babysitter still had a photo on her old phone of a note Jay had left her with her wages once. "Thanks for keeping our secret sugar monster off the sweets." The handwriting made my tongue feel thick. I forwarded it to the police, then sat on the kitchen floor and breathed like I'd just run somewhere. The youth club woman put me in touch with 2 people who'd given their permission to be contacted. One took me for a walk along the canal because, he said, it's easier to talk if you're moving. He is my age and steady in a way that made me want to copy him. He said Jay liked to get there early and help lock up, and that he had a way of being indispensably helpful and then using that to put himself in rooms teenagers were in and pretend he was simply one of the lads. He remembered the exact way Jay would put a hand on the back of your neck like he was steering you gently, which is such a specific gesture that it felt like someone naming a ghost that's been in your house for years. The other was older. He tried to report something once and got told there's no pattern here because Jay changed youth clubs when questions were asked. Hearing his voice on the phone, how it shook and then steadied when I said, "Me too," was bigger than any apology I have ever been given by anyone in authority. The detective rang me later to say not to expect a court case to appear out of thin air, which I already knew, but also that sometimes there's a different kind of consequence. Names that go on lists that mean someone can't work with children again even in volunteer roles, organizations that have to write audits that exist permanently where people can't pretend they forgot. It's an unglamorous justice. It still felt like air. The council wrote to invite me to something called a learning event. Not an inquiry, not a tribunal, the letter said, as if it were soothing a nervous animal. It was in a conference room that smelled of flip charts and instant coffee. There were mini chocolate bars in a bowl like we were at a training course. People went round and said who they were. Someone from school, someone from youth services, someone whose title was a long string of safeguarding words that blurred. They used phrases like missed opportunities and disguised compliance, and then sometimes, less rehearsed, they said "I am sorry." They put the referrals up on a screen with names taken off and I watched myself appear and disappear in bullet points. Concern raised. No disclosure. Mother present. No further action. The woman from school who had written the note about me being tactile was pale and fierce in a way I recognized from teachers who go home and cry into the washing up. She said, without looking at me, because you aren't supposed to address the person in the case in those rooms, we should have stayed in it. We let no disclosure be the end when it should have been the start. Someone else said, he was very good at weaponizing Mum's vulnerabilities. Weaponizing is such a mechanical, ugly word. It was also exactly right. My mum found out about the event, which I didn't tell her about, because nothing stays quiet in our family. She left a tin of shortbread outside my cousin's flat with a letter underneath like she was doing a neighborly thing. I read it on the stairs. It started with "You've always had a vivid imagination" and ended with "If you make me homeless, people will say you've killed 2 people in your life." 2. She's always been good at making guilt feel like a family heirloom. There was also, printed accidentally on the reverse side, a draft of an email to the solicitor, tracking changes left on that read, "We must present a united front that my son is troubled and lying. If we lose the house I will be on the street." Deleted in red, I knew, but not like that. I put the letter back in the tin and left it on the landing like it could return itself. The solicitor tried me again. "Your mother is in a difficult position," he said, like it was new information. He asked whether I would reconsider the deed of variation so she could benefit from the full estate. He said, "It would cost you nothing," as if it wasn't costing me the ground I stood on. I told him I had no interest in smoothing anything over. I didn't tell him I'd looked up the house on the land registry and seen my stepfather's name alone. I didn't tell him I'd stood outside that house at 2 in the morning a week before and looked at the bedroom window I used to climb out of and felt nothing except the wish that the bricks would fall down and do me the favor of deciding something for me. It is not revenge I want. It's not even consequences. It's space. It's silence where there should have been silence. Out of nowhere, an email from a woman whose name I didn't recognize. She'd been married to Jay before my mom, briefly, before me. The paragraphs were matter of fact in a way that made me trust them. She attached a scanned non-molestation order from 2002 with his signature that made my stomach turn because he signed it like he signed everything. A flourish that pretended to be charm. She said he had a different surname then, which meant the early volunteer checks might not have caught the history. She had warned the church he started showing up at to help with youth evenings. No one wanted unpleasantness. She wanted me to know, this line underlined itself as I read it, that none of this began with me and it didn't end with me and I hadn't conjured it by being alive in its path. I printed it out and put it in the drawer with the council notes. It doesn't change what happened. It changes where it sits in my head. All of this moved something in me from thought to action. I went to a post office with a form I'd filled in 3 times and scratched out twice and did my deed poll. The woman behind the glass didn't blink when I said the name. My dad's surname tasted like a place I had visited as a child and unexpectedly remembered the directions too. I walked out into the rain with a tube under my arm that said in boring official words that I am not tied to my stepfather by roll call anymore. I took the certificate to the bank and asked them to change the name on the account with the check from Jay in it, not because I intend to spend it without thinking, but because watching a teller type in my dad's name and link it to money my abuser meant as a collar made something in my spine unknot. I booked a session with a therapist and paid for it from that account. It felt like laundering. The police rang to say the property store needed to know what I wanted to do with the ring once the paperwork was finished. You can have it returned to you, the property officer said, as if it were a normal lost and found. Or we can arrange for it to be destroyed. Hearing the word destroyed made something fizz in me like a cheap firework. I told him to destroy it. He said they can send a certificate if I want. I do. It's not proof in a way that convinces anyone who doesn't want to be convinced. It will be proof to me. There has been kindness threaded through this in ways I didn't expect. My head of year from school, now retired, growing tomatoes in a greenhouse he's very proud of, apparently, wrote to say he remembered me as smart and funny and wearing the same battered black rucksack for 3 years. He apologized for not knowing what to ask. He said he would have believed me. He said he always suspected something and that he wishes he had pushed harder even if it would have annoyed everyone. He didn't owe me that. I cried anyway. My cousin painted me a terrible picture of a terrible cat because she said our flat needed something that isn't a document. We hung it crooked on purpose. I keep thinking about that safe deposit box. How he kept pieces of me like you keep the receipt for a coat because you think it proves it belongs to you. I rented a box of my own. I put in a copy of my deed poll, a photo of my dad I got from a cousin on his side I'd never met until last week. The nose is the same, the bad haircut is the same, the receipts for my first 2 therapy sessions, the little metal tag from the locksmith who came to change our front door because I decided we deserved locks I chose. If I am going to keep anything, it will be things I chose that say I am not anyone's secret. I left the bank and realized I had not checked my phone for 2 hours and that nothing had exploded in my absence. I wish I could say I slept like a child that night. I didn't. I lay there with the letter from Jay crawling under my skin the way it does. But morning came anyway. I made coffee, badly, because I haven't learned how to make it properly and it turns out that's a skill you have to teach yourself. I stood by the window with the mug warming my hands and felt, for a second, the kind of quiet you cannot buy and you cannot inherit. I am not fixing anything. I am not making meaning out of this for anyone else. I am, stubbornly, repeatedly, putting the truth into rooms it didn't get to stand in before, and then walking out into a day that has my name on it. The new one. The old one. Mine. The certificate for the ring came in a plastic wallet with a barcode like it was something you'd check out of a library. Item destroyed as per instruction, it said in a font that was pretending not to be emotional about it. I took it to the bank and slid it into my box with the deed poll and my dad's photo. The box is the only place where paper feels heavier in a good way. 2 days later the council published their learning brief. They sent me a link and a version with names taken out and dates taken out and still, somehow, my life sat there recognizable in bullet points and arrows. I scrolled all the way down to the recommendations because that's where they hide the verbs. Do not wait for a disclosure. Do not accept a non-abusing parent's narrative where it contradicts observable behavior. It shouldn't have felt like a victory. It did. A quiet one. Like turning a corner and finding a light you didn't switch on. My cousin rang me while I was reading it and said, "Please don't be angry." Which is a great way to make your heart go sideways. She'd gone over to Mum's to fetch post because Mum still pretends she isn't in the house when people knock. The boiler had broken. The handyman moved the kickboard under the kitchen units and found an envelope that had slid back years ago. It was stuffed with the kind of paperwork you only keep if you never intend anyone to see it. A typed sheet titled House Rules with the same list she gave my cousin all those years ago. Don't sit on his lap, locked doors, and a line at the bottom I keep bumping into with my eyes. Do not mention any of this to my name. He is dramatic and will cause a scene. There were printouts, too, pages of texts between Mum and Jay from 2009 that she must have emailed herself when she thought she'd lose her phone. Highlighter. Margin notes. Stop being sloppy written in her handwriting next to a message from him that said, "He kissed me first." She'd circled first like it mattered more than anything else on the page. My cousin took photos, sent them to me from the hallway because she said she couldn't stand the way the kitchen smelled like old oil when she breathed. I forwarded them to the detective. She rang me back and was very careful with her words. "Thank you for sending these. They corroborate." Corroborate is a cold word. It warms something. I don't know why I hadn't thought to check my credit history before. Maybe I didn't want to find something else he'd left his fingerprints on. I signed up on my phone in the queue at the post office and there it was immediately, like a stain shows up under a UV light. A catalog account opened when I was 17, a cheap electronics store card with my name and our old address, a mobile contract I don't remember having. All closed, all marked as settled, all dated neatly across the exact years where parcels used to arrive that I wasn't allowed to open because it's a surprise. I sent SARs. One company emailed me a scan of a paper application from 2011 with my signature at the bottom. It isn't my signature. It's his tidy little flourish pretending to be me. The N on my name done like a looped ribbon because he always thought that looked classy. I reported it. Action Fraud gave me a reference that looks like a number plate. The detective added it to the file. It shouldn't change the shape of any of this, and yet it does, a fraction. He didn't just keep bits of me in boxes, he used my name as a tool. It makes the check in my account feel even more like a collar he meant to tighten whenever he fancied. I met Jay's ex-wife in a service station off the M4 because it felt like a place where you could walk away mid-story and nobody would ask questions. She has the kind of steadiness that makes you want to apologize less. She brought a folder with plastic sleeves and a post-it note stuck to the front. You can keep what you need. Inside was his old deed poll, different surname, different neat lies, and a copy of the non-molestation order I'd already seen, and a letter he wrote her in 2001 that I can't get out of my mouth even to myself. It had all the same phrases he used on me, the same sickly flattery turned threat. You make me better. Don't turn me into the sort of man who hurts people. The trick of putting the responsibility back in your hands like he's passing you a delicate glass, and if it breaks, that's on you. She said he started turning up at a youth drop-in after that, and when she told the leader he was trouble, they said, "We can't ban someone for being odd." I don't know what to do with the way every door he knocked on was at least a little ajar. The diocesan safeguarding team sent me a letter on thick paper that said they've logged him on their persons of concern register retroactively and issued an internal alert, so if his name turns up attached to anything old in a parish file, it triggers a review. They used the word regret 3 times. I didn't expect that to be anything more than a formality. It sat in my hands like a brick that had been put back into a wall where it should have been years ago. Then the solicitor stopped pretending to be a receptionist with good phone manners and sent an actual claim form. The Inheritance Act. My mother is applying for reasonable financial provision from the estate and my name is there as a person with an interest. I had to read the line 3 times because the word interest looked wrong next to me. Her witness statement made me sweat through my shirt. My son was always difficult. He is vindictive. He has fabricated a narrative that is harming his family. In the same paragraph, I did not know and he instigated it. My new solicitor, mine, sat across from me in a room that smelled like damp carpet and said, very calmly, "We will keep this about numbers and not let it become about name calling." I used the check from Jay to pay the retainer. It felt like washing the muck off a coin and using it to buy bleach. We're not going to court yet. There's a mediation. I am not going to sit in a room where my childhood is described as an asset to be negotiated over. My solicitor will go. I wrote a short position statement that said, I will not consent to any deed of variation. I will not contribute voluntarily to provision for a person who facilitated my abuse. I will consider settlement offers that leave my bequest untouched. It felt rude. It also felt like putting a chair under a door handle and finally sleeping. In the middle of all of this, my dad's sister found me. She sent a Facebook message that started with, "Are you actually, new surname?" And I cried before I even replied because seeing my dad's name against mine in someone else's sentence did something simple and enormous. We met in a cafe with terrible lighting. She brought a biscuit tin that used to have buttons in it. Inside, the hospital bracelet they'd cut off my wrist when I was born, a birthday card my dad bought in advance and never got to write in because he went back into hospital too fast, a cassette tape with shopping list plus answer machine written on it because my aunt recorded over everything in the 90s and now regrets it. We bought a cheap cassette player off Marketplace and listened in her kitchen. It's mostly beeps and old adverts from the radio and then my dad's voice calling a dog that isn't there anymore. The dog's claws on lino. The sound of someone you are made out of doing a normal thing. I didn't know I needed that. The church wrote to say they've submitted a serious incident report to the Charity Commission because 2 volunteers have now come forward to say Jay was inappropriate with them and they were not believed at the time. They used the phrase organizational repentance and I rolled my eyes alone in my flat and still put the letter in the drawer because repentance is better than pretense. Mom hasn't been quiet. She posted a status about being persecuted by a fantasist and tagged me under my old name like she was yanking a scab. I reported it. The platform took it down. She left 3 voicemails in a row telling me God will judge me, then one saying she can't pay the gas bill because of me, then one trying to sound like the mum from a television advert who wants to know when we can make amends over a cup of tea. My cousin forwarded a picture of another letter Mum slid under her door, this one addressed to the mediator, as if the mediator lives with us. The last line, "You could stop all this if you chose to." There is still part of me that answers those sentences even if I don't pick up the phone. I keep putting that part back to bed. The detective called to say the DBS will still take the referral even though he's dead. It livens dormant information, she said. I asked what that means. It means when organizations search old files, his name makes alarms instead of looking like an empty field, she said. It is so boringly bureaucratic. It might save someone anyway. I got my passport with my dad's name on it. The photos make me look like I've been caught doing something I shouldn't, but that's just a passport photos job. I took a train to the coast with my cousin. We stood on a gray beach and ate chips with too much salt, and when a dog came and sat on my shoe like I was a place it had been trying to find all along, we laughed into the wind until my face hurt. Nothing transformed. Nothing washed clean. It was still better than being 20 feet from the house where I used to count his footsteps on the stairs. The school invited me back to talk to new teachers about professional curiosity. I said no, I am not a teaching resource. I did, however, write them a paragraph they can read out. If you are waiting to be certain, you are waiting too long. The head emailed back to say thank you. He sent a picture of his tomatoes, which are ridiculous and perfect, and I saved it for reasons I cannot explain except that it's nice to be sent pictures of tomatoes by people who once had any power over you. The property store rang to ask if I want the other items back now the case paperwork is finished. Destroy them, I said again, because I wanted to use the word twice. All of them? All of them. He read the list back to me: ring, train ticket, wrapping paper, like we were ordering a takeaway and didn't want anything to be missed. He said he'll send me a certificate when it's done. I have a space for it in the box already. My solicitor thinks Mom will settle because the house is not cleanly hers and she can't face the risk. He used words like spousal rights, equitable interest, maintenance. It's all maths and precedent until you remember it's also my name on a check that he wrote because he liked to keep me on a string even after death. I booked and paid for 6 months of therapy in advance out of that account. It felt like an act of theft in the right direction. I've started keeping a folder by the door with every letter that says an institution has put something in writing on my behalf. It's ugly and practical and makes me walk out of the flat straighter. There is no neat ending to this part either. There probably won't be. But this week I closed one box and opened another. One with a barcode that says something old as ash now, and one that holds my new passport, a voice on a tape, and the receipt for the locksmith who changed our locks. I am not building a shrine. I am building a paper trail I can live inside. I am still not fixing anyone. I am still not providing a story that makes it easy to forgive. I am, stubbornly, repeatedly, refusing to make myself small enough to fit back into any of the places they prepared for me. The day has my name on it. The boring paperwork does too. That will have to be the point for now.